free to use any methods necessary, but I want them alive. No disintegrations.
As you wish.
I'm a simple man making his way through the galaxy, like my father before me. My name is Boba Fett.
Welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. Boba Fett is one of the most iconic, recognizable, and beloved characters in Star Wars. About 43 years after his introduction in the Star Wars Holiday Special, we all know why fans love the coolest bounty hunter in the galaxy. It's the perfect combination of the look, the story, the legacy, and the lore, and how badass Boba Fett is. So the answer is obvious. We love Boba Fett because, well, come on, he's Boba Fett. But trust me, there's much more to it than that. A long and fascinating history that led to Boba Fett becoming such a fan favorite.
You may take Captain Solo to Jabba the Hutt after I have Skywalker.
He's no good to me dead.
Most of us were born long after the original trilogy came out, so we all fell in love with Boba Fett almost as a matter of fact, because at that point, he was cemented as one of the coolest Star Wars characters ever. Boba had a backstory. We knew he was a Mandalorian. We had both the canon and the legend stories. But even before all that, when there were only 3 Star Wars movies and nothing else, Boba Fett became an instant icon. As the book of Boba Fett is right around the corner, let's return to the very start and explore how Boba Fett became one of the biggest characters ever in Star Wars.
Boba Fett, you didn't know who he was, you didn't know where he came from.
But he didn't get much screen time.
I never thought I'd be talking about him after 1980.
Despite his lack of screen time, next to no dialogue, he's everywhere.
Boba Fett entered our lives in The Empire Strikes Back. It wasn't his first appearance in Star Wars. There's actually a fascinating story on how Boba was created, and we'll dive into all that later. But Empire Strikes Back was the introduction that everyone remembers. It's the movie where Boba Fett did the most, and it's also what ascended him into iconic status. Boba Fett's first scene sets the tone for the character right away. Even before we see him, we hear this.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
Bounty hunters that immediately caught the fans' attention. Back then, Westerns were huge and everyone loved them, and one of the most iconic characters at the time was Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name. Much of Star Wars is inspired by Westerns, especially the Sergio Leone ones. George Lucas intended Boba Fett to be the Star Wars version of The Man with No Name, so Lucas had us with bounty hunters. And people just love these types of characters, so Boba Fett's introduction is perfect. It was our first real taste for the bigger universe of Star Wars, the mystery of the criminal underworld, the intrigue of what other forces are at play other than the Empire and the Rebels.
I said, this is a good character. People like the bad guys.
All the other bounty hunters are cool in their own right, but our eyes immediately go to Boba Fett. The badass armor, the epic helmet, the freaking missile on his back. It's all so perfect, such an amazing design.
He's encased in battle-worn, scorched armor that we just know nothing about. And all of these mysteries form kind of this amazingly cool vision of who this guy is.
And Vader talks to him directly, which tells us that Boba Fett is the bounty hunter that we must pay attention to. And then we get this iconic line.
But I want them alive. No disintegrations.
No disintegrations? That sounds oddly specific. Vader doesn't say no killing or don't hurt them too much. No disintegrations. That just gets our minds racing. What kind of a badass is this guy that Vader has to tell him not to disintegrate Han and Leia? What is the story of this mystery man? With no exposition, Boba Fett became a fascinating character. And then there's Boba's response. It's not what Boba says, but it's how he says it.
As you wish.
There's some swag there. It's exactly how the Man with No Name would answer someone. A type of cowboy's growl.
Didn't hear what the bet was.
Your life.
Now the amazing Jeremy Bulloch was in the armor, but Jason Wingreen is the man who voiced Boba Fett. I love Tamura Morrison. I think he embodies Boba Fett perfectly. But Wingreen's voice had power to it, and the space cowboy voice that Boba Fett needed at that time.
No disintegrations.
As you wish.
From his first line of dialogue, there's a sense that Boba Fett isn't scared of Vader. I mean, no one talks back to Vader. All the officers are afraid of him because Vader would crush their windpipes. Remember this?
To find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
And here's this mystery bounty hunter talking to Vader without the usual fear or respect. That immediately makes us love this guy after one line of dialogue. And the same can be said about his next line, when he again talks back to Vader.
You may take Captain Solo to Jabba the Hutt after I have Skywalker.
He's no good to me dead. What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me.
Again, it's not what he says, but the way he says it. And yeah, I am micro-analyzing this scene, but it's because it is so iconic. This set the tone for Boba Fett. It was just these precious minutes of screen time that made him into such a fan favorite, and the mystery surrounding him that captured our imaginations. You could say that without realizing at the time, the minimalistic approach George Lucas took with Boba Fett paid off in magical ways. Fans were provoked to use their imaginations to solve this Fett mystery.
I think what made Boba Fett really popular was that he was a mystery.
Boba Fett is a man on a mission. His job is to deliver Han Solo to Jabba, that's all. He is a bounty hunter, and he's successful in everything he does in The Empire Strikes Back. Han tricks the Empire, but not Boba. He's there following the Millennium Falcon, establishing that he's just as crafty and smart as Han. And by the end of the movie, he gets his man and finishes the job. Also, there's this really brief, missable moment when Luke is on Cloud City. Maybe I'm microanalyzing again, but you can see Boba turning his head in Luke's direction as he hears him pulling his blaster out.
I see you.
And it's proven by the fact that a moment later, Boba fires on Luke. And of course, there's his ship, Slave One, and it's almost as iconic as the man himself. Its design is so clever and different from any other ship that we'd seen at the time. The way it transforms, it just feels unique. In the 3 years between Empire and Return of the Jedi, Boba Fett soared to iconic status for fans. While everyone talked about the "I'm your father" reveal, Boba ascended to being one of the best things about The Empire Strikes Back, despite only a few minutes of screen time. By the time Jedi came out, we had some big expectations for our favorite bounty hunter, and we got rewarded, seeing Boba in action, flying with his jetpack, and going toe-to-toe with Luke, but then it all got deflated as Boba was killed off in a pathetic way. So yes, the Boba Fett we got in Return of the Jedi was a far cry from the one in Empire. Lucas himself admitted that if he knew then that Boba Fett would become such a fan favorite, his death would have been a lot more impressive. Boba Fett was so beloved that his death only added to the mystery surrounding him. Fans became obsessed with his fate, and no one believed that the bounty hunter was truly dead. Boba Fett's story was expanded in our minds, cementing him as an icon. We had to wait over a decade until the expanded universe continued Boba Fett's story. The now decanonized Legend stories not only revealed Boba's fate, but they also created a rich and fascinating story for the bounty hunter, forever cementing Boba Fett as one of the best Star Wars characters.
One helmeted bounty hunter that looked unbelievably cool has spawned an entire mythology within this bigger mythology, an entire race of people.
But before we unpack the importance of the expanded universe, dive into the prequels and how we get to the Book of Boba Fett, let's talk about how the character was created, and how Boba Fett became popular even before he appeared in the movies. Now, the first movie to introduce Boba Fett was The Empire Strikes Back. Boba Fett does show up in A New Hope, but not in the original 1977 film. He was inserted into the movie in the special edition. But Boba Fett made his mark long before Empire.
Okay, we'd like to introduce Boba Fett, and here he is, a new character. Can you speak to us, Boba?
Certainly.
Initially, Boba Fett's armor was meant to outfit a new elite squad of stormtroopers, the Super Troopers. At the time, the armor would be white, just like the rest of the stormtroopers. Now, there was some backstory to the armor, as it belonged to the Imperial Shock Troopers, warriors who fought in the Clone Wars who were then wiped out by the Jedi. But because of budgetary constraints, production couldn't create too many armors to outfit a whole squad, so plans had to be changed, and that's how we got one perfect bounty hunter. And thank the powers that be for that. Can you imagine a world without Boba Fett? I doubt if anyone would be talking about the Super Troopers today.
They were Mandalorians, or they wore Mandalorian armor, and they were kind of this race of super commandos that were known for having fought against the Jedi Knights. All of a sudden you have several things that as a kid you're just like, oh my gosh, these are the coolest guys ever.
And we must thank Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston for Boba Fett's design. What's fascinating is that Boba Fett's look is based on Darth Vader's initial design. Originally, the plan was for Vader to be a bounty hunter himself. So when Lucasfilm needed to create Boba Fett quickly after the historic success of Star Wars, they took many of the ideas from the original plans for Vader. Boba Fett entered our lives in the most unexpected way. It wasn't in the movies, not even in the animated form. No, it was the San Anselmo County Fair Parade in September 1978. Boba Fett was a complete unknown and a new character that had yet to appear in any of the movies. And there he was, walking the streets filled with fans right next to Darth Vader. Vader was already an icon back then, only a year since the first movie came out. He was the rock star, accompanied by this mysterious cool guy in amazing armor with a freaking missile on his back. And this sent a clear message to fans that Boba Fett is something special, that he's going to be a massive villain worthy to share the stage with Darth Vader. Soon after that, Boba appeared in the non-canon animated holiday special, hyping the already crazy anticipation for The Empire Strikes Back. Boba was described as Vader's right-hand man, which established him as one of the big villains for the sequel. And on top of that, Boba Fett's toys and merchandise began selling in droves. You saw him everywhere as the brilliant marketing made fans fall in love with this unknown character, years before he even appeared on the big screen.
And I was already a huge Boba Fett fan before Empire Strikes Back even came out. So Boba was a star before the film ever premiered, and it had us kids just so excited to see the movie and to see him in it.
The Boba Fett action figure was special because at the time, there were Darth Vader toys and a bunch of stormtroopers. And back then, kids used to tell their own stories, especially when there was only one Star Wars movie. So Boba Fett became a must-have toy, and thanks to his cool armor, weapons, and gadgets, everyone wanted to get their hands on those action figures. That marketing push is one of the main reasons why Boba Fett got so big. And funny enough, Boba Fett was meant to have a massive role in Return of the Jedi. There were plans for him to even be the main villain. But then we got this instead. When Boba Fett came back in Legends, Lucasfilm cleverly capitalized on the love for Boba, with countless novels, comic books, video games, and much more. Boba Fett was once again everywhere, and thanks to these stories, Boba Fett and Star Wars became better. These stories have also transformed Boba Fett from a villain into an anti-hero, and these stories were just as influential as the original trilogy in making Boba Fett into an icon. It was the expanded universe that established Boba as a Mandalorian, and this is how the Mandalorians were created and why they are so beloved by fans. If not for Boba Fett, the Mandalorians would never have been such a big deal. They were perfect additions for Star Wars, and like Boba, they quickly became fan favorites. The Mandalorians had their rich history and lore, legendary warriors who were capable of challenging Jedi Knights, and while most of these stories are not canon anymore, they still influence the new canon, cementing the Mandalorians as some of the most interesting people in the Star Wars galaxy. This is why the Mandalorian became such a sensation. The helmet, the armor. Even if it's not Boba Fett, anyone who looks like this is immediately linked with the fan favorite bounty hunter.
Oh, you know, for a second I thought you were this other guy.
Boba Fett made his official return in the prequels, but the reaction to Kid Boba wasn't the best, to say the least. I guess we're just not meant to see our favorite villains when they were kids.
Hang on, son, we'll move into the asteroid field. And we'll have a couple of surprises for him.
Still, Boba's return gave us some great things, like Jango Fett. Say what you will about Attack of the Clones, but that fight between Jango and Obi-Wan was a dream come true. Finally, we witnessed a fight between a Jedi and a Mandalorian, and it was glorious. And with Jango, we finally got to see all of Boba Fett's cool weapons and gadgets in action, something that wasn't possible in the 80s. Also, Slave One and this. Oh, I love that sound. So after many failed plans to make movies about Boba Fett, the legendary bounty hunter has made his return in The Mandalorian. First, we heard the iconic spurs in Season 1. And then, Boba Fett came back in epic fashion in Season 2. The Mandalorian is a great show, but there's no denying that Boba Fett paved the way for its success. And now we are heading to his own standalone show, The Book of Boba Fett. This just proves how successfully Boba Fett stood the test of time, that he's still relevant for the fans after all of these years, that a character who had so little screen time became a staple of this franchise. Boba Fett will forever be an integral character in the Star Wars universe. The look will forever be legendary, and this is why we love Boba Fett. But why do you love Boba Fett? Let me know down in the comments below or @ me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.